I found out that the people we are told to look up to, the ones who claim to hold the fabric of our society together, are actually the ones tearing it apart, for sport. And I still don't know if I'm a hero or a dead man walking for what I'm about to tell you. I was invited into the inner circle, the rooms where the air is thick with expensive scotch and the kind of power that doesn't just influence laws but dictates who gets to breathe. And what I saw wasn't just corruption. It was a game where the lives of everyday people are nothing more than tokens on a board. I've spent the last 3 weeks looking over my shoulder, wondering if the clicking on my phone line is real or just my own mounting paranoia. But I can't keep this buried anymore, because if I do, I'm just as guilty as they are. Before I dive into the absolute madness of how these leaders operate behind closed doors, I have to ask you, if you stumbled upon a secret that could dismantle the lives of the most powerful people in the country, but would likely destroy your own life in the process, would you burn it all down, or would you stay silent to survive? My name is Elias, and for the last decade, I've worked as a high-level logistics consultant for some of the biggest political campaigns and nonprofit foundations in the country, which basically means I'm the guy who makes sure the miracles happen behind the scenes. I grew up believing in the system, thinking that even if there were a few bad apples, the core of leadership was built on a genuine desire to improve humanity. But that illusion didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces during a weekend retreat at a private estate in the Appalachian Mountains. I was brought in to manage the technical security and scheduling for a summit that was publicly branded as a global human flourishing initiative, a meeting of minds involving senators, tech CEOs, and billionaire philanthropists who were supposedly there to solve the housing crisis and food insecurity. The estate was a fortress of glass and stone, miles away from any public road, and the atmosphere was supposed to be one of heavy-duty problem-solving. But the moment the cameras were tucked away and the staff were dismissed to their quarters, the masks didn't just slip. They were thrown into the fireplace. It started on the second night when I was called into the main library to fix a technical glitch with the encrypted server they were using for their presentations, and as I crouched behind the mahogany desk, the room filled with 4 of the most recognizable faces in the country, men and women you see on the news every night preaching about equity and the common good. They didn't even notice me there, or perhaps they just didn't care because to them, I was just a service worker, a ghost in the machine, and what I heard was a casual discussion about controlled instability in 3 different major metropolitan areas. They weren't talking about how to help people. They were laughing about how a certain spike in crime rates in specific zip codes would drive down property values just in time for their shell companies to sweep in, buy up the land for pennies on the dollar. It was a game of humanity monopoly played with real lives, real families, and real blood. And they were keeping score with a level of sociopathic glee that made my skin crawl. One of them, a man who has built his entire political brand on being a man of the people, poured a glass of 30-year-old bourbon and joked about how easy it was to keep the public distracted with manufactured culture wars while they adjusted the levers of the economy to suit their personal portfolios. They called us the variables, not people, not citizens, but variables that needed to be managed through fear and scarcity, so we would never look up long enough to see who was actually holding the leash. I sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs so loudly I was sure they'd hear it, recording every single word on my phone, which was tucked into my breast pocket, capturing the sound of them debating which social programs to cut, not because they were ineffective, but because their failure would create the exact kind of desperation they needed to push through their next round of privatized infrastructure contracts. I realized then that the horrifying game wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was a standard operating procedure for the elite. I spent the rest of the night in my room, staring at the ceiling, realizing that my entire career had been spent inadvertently helping these monsters polish their public image while they plotted the downfall of the very people they claimed to serve. The deeper I looked into the files on the server I was supposed to be fixing, the worse it got, as I found spreadsheets detailing the intentional delay of medical supplies to certain regions to test market resilience and emails discussing how to manipulate the media into framing a literal man-made disaster as an act of God to avoid liability. I saw projections of projected deaths, not as tragedies, but as statistical necessities for the implementation of new surveillance technologies. They were discussing the upcoming election cycle not as a democratic process, but as a marketing campaign where the winner had already been decided in that very room. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach as I realized the extent of the manipulation. Every major event of the last 5 years, every crisis, every triumph, had been meticulously planned and executed by these few individuals. They weren't just leaders, they were architects of a reality designed to keep them at the top while the rest of us struggled to stay afloat. I thought about my own family, my friends, and all the people I had worked with over the years, all of them believing in the lies, all of them playing their parts in a play they didn't even know was being staged. The sheer scale of the betrayal was overwhelming. I knew I couldn't just walk away. I had to do something, but the risks were astronomical. I was one man against a machine that had the power to erase me from existence. I spent hours analyzing the data I had captured, looking for any weakness, any way to expose them without getting caught. I knew I needed to be smart, to be careful, but the clock was ticking. They would soon realize that the server hadn't been fixed and that someone had accessed the files. I had to move fast. I began to draft a plan, a way to leak the information to the right people, people who could actually do something with it. But who could I trust? In a world where everyone had a price, who was truly on the side of humanity? I thought about the journalists I knew, the activists, the few politicians who seemed genuine. But even then, I couldn't be sure. The reach of these people was vast, their influence pervasive. I felt like I was walking through a minefield, every step potentially my last. As the sun began to rise over the mountains, I knew my time was running out. I had to make a move. I had to decide who I was and what I stood for. Was I just another variable in their game, or was I something more? So that is the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have stayed quiet and taken the money, or would you have risked everything to tell the truth? I decided that I couldn't live with the silence, but the moment I tried to leave the estate the next morning, I realized I was already in a cage. My security clearance had been revoked at the gate, and the technical glitch I had been called to fix was actually a trap to see if I would access files I wasn't supposed to see. The lead security officer, a man with cold, dead eyes who I knew had a background in extraordinary renditions, met me in the hallway and told me the senator wanted to have a private word with me in the study. I knew that if I went into that room, I wasn't coming out, so I did the only thing I could think of. I triggered the fire suppression system in the server room, creating a chaotic distraction. Alarms and rushing water. In the confusion, I managed to slip out through a kitchen service entrance and ran into the woods, clutching my phone and a backup drive like they were my only lifelines, which they were. I spent 14 hours trekking through the freezing mountain brush, hearing the drones buzzing overhead, knowing that these leaders were using every resource at their disposal to hunt me down like an animal because I had dared to peek behind the curtain of their horrifying game. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot. Every shadow seemed to be a pursuer. My clothes were torn, my hands were bleeding, but the adrenaline kept me going. I finally reached a highway and managed to hitch a ride with a trucker who didn't ask too many questions. I eventually made it to a small town, used a burner phone to upload the data to a series of dead man switches I had set up with trusted journalists, and waited for the world to explode. The aftermath has been a slow-motion car crash. While some of the information has leaked, the leaders have used their media puppets to brand me as a disgruntled employee, a conspiracy theorist, and even a foreign agent. But the truth is out there in the hands of the people who know how to read between the lines. They haven't caught me yet, but they've frozen my bank accounts, slandered my name, and I'm currently living in a basement in a city I won't name, watching the very people I exposed continue to sit on their thrones, though I can see the cracks starting to form in their foundation. I know they're still looking for me, and I know my life will never be the same, but for the first time in years, I can look at myself in the mirror. ND know that I didn't just stand by while the world was sold out from under us. I've seen the protests starting, the calls for accountability growing louder, and I know that even if I don't survive this, the seed of truth has been planted. The game is no longer a secret, and once people know the rules, they can start to change them. It's a long road ahead, and the leaders won't go down without a fight, but they've lost their most powerful weapon, the darkness they thrived in. I am just one voice, but I am part of a chorus that is starting to rise, and that is something they can't control. This experience has taught me that the real enemies of humanity aren't found in dark alleys or foreign lands. They are the ones who smile at us from podiums and sign our laws while secretly betting on our failure for their own profit. They play a game where we are the pawns, and the only way to win is to stop playing by their rules and start holding them accountable for the blood on their hands. If you've listened to this far, you now carry a piece of this burden too, and the question is no longer just about what I did, but about what we all do when we realize the system is rigged by design. Please, if this story opened your eyes even a little bit, like this video so it reaches more people and we can break through the algorithms they use to keep us blind. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of the truth they try to bury, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Do you think there's any hope for real change, or are the leaders too far gone? Stay vigilant, stay questioning, and I'll see you all in the next story.